Okay, we're back to talk about essentially the entirety of the season four of The Bear on FX. Specifically looking now at episodes 6 through 10. So spoilers ahead for the entirety of the season and of the series. All of these episodes written by Christopher Storer and directed by Christopher Storer and Joanna Callow. Basically, in the second half of the season, the restaurant staff, are continuing to try to make improvements to the restaurant to maintain its ability to stay open, while also trying to make improvements in themselves as they deal with a lot of their past trauma. To try to quickly go through some of these things, says father recovered from his heart attack. She eventually decides she wants to stay at the Bear instead of going to work with Adam Shapiro. At Tiff and Frank's wedding, where the entire Berzato extended family is there, Richie and Frank begin to bond over taking care of Eva and confront some of their insecurities about each other. Ibrahim and Albert begin some plans to turn the beef into a franchise with more locations. Tina is looking for ways to become more efficient and better at her job. She gets some encouragement from Luca and finally is able to achieve some of the goals that she has. Marcus asks for more firepower to help with the desserts. Luca stages with him, and they learn at the end of the series end of the season, that Marcus has been named one of Food and Wine's best new chefs. At the end of the season, Pete tells Sydney that Carmi wrote himself out of the partnership agreement for the restaurant because he plans to leave once finances are more above water. Sid confronts Carmi about this. Carmi believes he has to leave because he's not a chef for the right reasons anymore. He wants to find out, A, what it's like when he's not a chef, and B, what Sydney can do because she is so talented and doing it for the right reasons. Richie joins that discussion, and he and Carmi reconcile after working through their feelings about Mikey and each other. Sydney agrees to the new agreement of working at the Bear only if Richie and Natalie are co-partners with her and Cicero. And then we're left with this clock that ran out. So we were left with this ambiguous note. And then, 72 hours later, it's less ambiguous in the fact that this is now going to come back. What that looks like, we don't know. But we are aware now that there will be a fifth season of The Bear. So presumably the restaurant is not closing, despite the fact that the clock ran out. So if I can kind of guide our discussion, but a lot to hit on here.
Yeah, well, I mean, to start there, I never thought once I finished season four last week, I thought, well, that's clearly not the end of this.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but it is interesting because then in the interim, I did see numerous people saying that maybe not that they thought it was the end of the series, but I did see some people saying that they thought it should be,
Mm.
which I thought was interesting. I mean, how would you feel if it did end here, if that was just it?
Um, I wonder, first of all, before I answer that specific question, I wonder if they thought that this was going to be or had a sense that it could be the end. I mean, last episode is titled Goodbye. It's a sense of it could be. We found a way to keep things going, even if we don't show you how it's going to keep going. Um, but yeah, even with the clock running out, even with us hearing the literal goodbye, it seems to be that there was too much on the table and too many problems solved about how to keep it open that they would just say, okay, we can just end it now.
Yeah, and I mean also because to me that the last episode, which is primarily this conversation between
Yeah,
Carmi and Sydney and then Richie also, where that leaves
yeah,
it in terms of, you know, okay, Sid agrees ultimately if Richie's also like a co-owner, right? But then the question of like, but hey, do we even have a restaurant? Like, is this going to work? I don't know. I think it would have been a
yeah.
very odd place. It didn't feel like a series finale to me, but I thought it was interesting that apparently it did to a lot of other people, or um, at least a lot of people thought it could be, and it sounds like you're more in that camp than I am.
Well, I just felt like there were signposts that tried to place it as a series finale, maybe because when they filmed this back in January and February, they had no idea at that point if it was coming back. So to leave it as ambiguous as it was, basically every piece of content I consumed about this when it was a recap or review of the season leaves with some sort of ambiguous ending, with a sense of we're certainly not going to close things off and say there's no way this is come back, or Cicero coming in and saying, "All right, that's it. Last service. We're done. We're closed." So they wanted to leave those options open. I think now that it's almost like I wish I had, to your point earlier, I wish I'd had this conversation in hindsight before this news. Because now everything in my brain is just thinking, okay, well, clearly this pointed to the idea it was coming back. This pointed to the idea that they were coming back. But if we didn't have that information, would we have felt like, well, these all the questions have been answered, things have been buttoned up. Yeah, I don't know that I would have felt that. It would have felt a little bit disappointing if it was a series finale.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. As you say, Mike, maybe this would have been kind of a more compelling conversation to have before we knew that it was renewed for season five. If
Hmm.
this had been the end, if I imagine that, that could potentially function. I think you're right about that. We'd be left to fill in certain things. And to me, one of the immediate moves I would make in my imagination is, well, you've got that plot line with Ibrahim and the beef window and Rob Reiner's character, Albert, and that ends with them looping in the computer, right?
Hmm.
Um, so I would have to imagine, and I guess now I'm speculating about something that will probably happen in season five in my
Yeah.
mind. That, oh well, okay, they are going to do that, right? They franchise the beef window, and then if this is viewed as all one business,
Yeah.
the profitability of the beef window allows the Bear to remain open as the fine dining restaurant that it wants to be.
Yeah, I got that sense as well, and the sense that okay, if we expand, even if it's just a mini expansion, the revenue, the profits from that can support the Bears. We help get it to the place that it needs to be. Carmi's salary leaving will help with that. This I put on notes, and also in a piece I wrote that if there's one or two or three things that yes, I really want to see what happens, it was this story because this was so much a sense of a scope of what we saw in these episodes, but there wasn't really anything at all that tied those two things together. There was this one really great conversation between Ibrahim and Carmi, where Carmi says, I want to pay more attention to it. I want to give you opportunity, but there's no sense of sort of movement on that once they have it. So yeah, now season five just has to explore that.
I think it's an interesting disjunction in a way, right?
Hmm.
Because you've got this one establishment, which used to be the beef, um, but now is the Bear, and they've kept the beef window, right? But okay, so you think about the disjunction between those two sides of the business. On the one hand, you've got the Bear,
Hmm.
which is, perhaps making exemplary food, gourmet chef, um, like potentially going to be eligible for a Michelin star or whatever, and operating at a loss, right? Like one of the big
Yeah.
questions of the season is, can this possibly be profitable?
Yes.
And how meaningfully it feels like the answer is no. Or,
Hmm.
even as we're getting close to the end, they show stuff on the screen, which I believe I'm reading correctly, that they finally, are making a small profit,
Yeah, that's right.
right? I think
Graphs
that's
and charts. Yeah.
what those lines mean.
Yeah.
Um, but then you've got the beef window, which is apparently like hugely profitable, massively efficient, right? Operating with a small staff. So it's like in business terms,
Hmm.
the beef window is a way better business, right? So I guess what I'm trying to get to is this sort of question that I think the season poses, which is along these lines of, all right, well, why are we doing this? Why are you running a restaurant? You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
if you're running a restaurant to make money, just franchise the beef. Forget about
Yeah.
this, you know, gourmet restaurant you're calling the Bear.
Yeah.
So that's not why you're doing it. You're doing it, as it were, for the love of the game or whatever,
Hmm.
right? So I think that's interesting to think about. And then I don't want to, I want to let you talk, right? But how that feeds into Carmi's decision ultimately, that's something I have a lot more thoughts about ultimately. But
Yeah, I think we can t tie that together because I think I sort of tripped on that a little bit too. The idea that, if I'm what realistically probably would have happened if I'm Cicero in computer as I go and say, hey, we're going to franchise the beef. We're going to turn this into a profitable multi-site expansion endeavor here. Um, the bear is just dragging us down. We're just having to to support it out of the profits of the beef when we can just be rolling in this and we can make you all whatever. We can make you all co-owners or whatever the sense may be. But I do think that that ties into what Carmi's decision is. So I don't think it's clearly not just a decision to say, okay, if I go, my salary will help the finances. That he doesn't even say that, right? What he
Mhm.
says is he doesn't know who he is without this sort of backdrop to his life. He knows Sid can do it. He knows Sid does it for the right reasons. Carmen clearly doesn't think he does anymore. But he trusts Sid, Richie, Cicero, Sugar, all of them enough to carry this on. And I think he's going to try to go figure out, do I really need this? Can I survive or be sustained without it? Because I've never had a life without something like this around me all the time.
Yeah, yeah, I think something like that's where we're going. And I don't know how I feel about it. I've sat with it for a week at this point. So what I would have said last Thursday probably differs from what I'm going to say now, and there's nothing for that. But one of the first things I thought was, I'm not sure if well, I'm trying to distinguish a couple of things, right? One is I'm not sure if I like it in narrative terms,
Yeah.
but I don't know, who cares if I like it? That's not the point. But it's very close to the other question of, does it make sense in terms of the character? And I guess I've ultimately landed on thinking that it does, but I'm not really on board with it. Right. So here's what I want to tie it back to. I want to tie it back to season two,
Yeah, okay.
because if you think back to season two, I think that was one of the big questions at play in this series about the idea of I don't know, work-life balance or something like
Hmm.
that. If you recall, even his Carmy's falling out with Claire, it was along these lines that he basically didn't feel like he could have this relationship with
Right.
her and also do the restaurant right, right? Um, he's in the walk-in. I'm stupid for trying to do this. I messed everything up because I tried to have a girlfriend, whatever.
Yeah.
And we talked about this at the time. It might be interesting to revisit that podcast conversation even. But I recall saying something like this, that I think or thought that what the bear was trying to do was to actually question that disjunction, right? So
Hmm.
Carney thinks he has to choose between something like a relationship with Claire and being the right kind of chef at the bear.
Yeah.
But he's wrong. At least in
Yeah.
my mind, I thought the show was pushing in the direction of saying that he's wrong. And I feel like now we are sort of revisiting that from the other way around. And I think it's noteworthy that if we put everything together, it's pretty early in the season, but it's after he visits Claire on the stoop that he calls Pete. And I think that's when he changed the agreement, even though we don't find out for multiple episodes.
Yeah, and the timeline of that I think is both intriguing and confusing to me because it seems like in everything else, or the other most chaotic parts of his life, relationship with Claire, relationship with his mom, his relationship with what is it, Uncle Lee, right? His relationship with Richie, even as they resolve things at the end, he's able to start working. How many times does he say in season 3 and 4, I need to be better, I need to do better? Well, he's able to do that with all these other relationships and sort of diminish the amount of chaos in them. But he thinks the only way to do that with the restaurant is just leave it. He can't figure out a way around not being chaotic or not letting that past sort of drive him to be the person he doesn't want to be at the restaurant. He can work on it with Donna, he can work on it with Claire, but he can't work it out in the restaurant. It just seems like I don't know, if you were this good and this talented, it seems like maybe you internally and others externally would be fighting for you to stay and try to figure it out.
Right. So I still wonder, if we're speculating about season five, which again we do know is going to exist
Yeah.
at this point, whether that's going to be kind of what goes on, right? Because at least the feeling I got at the end of season four was he's taken himself out of the ownership agreement, but he's not, like noping out of there tomorrow.
Yeah.
It seems like he's saying, I'm going to stick around and help you make this restaurant work and
Yes.
then leave. Right. So
Yes.
like my expectation would
Which
be in season five, right? One of the things you put on notes is what's Carmi going to be doing? I think he's still going to be working at the Bear. I mean, I don't know what else goes on in his storyline because I
Yeah, I was
think
gonna say this doesn't seem like a 2 week process. I mean, this could be. I mean, it's clear this is what the season is going to be, but yeah, I don't think Carmi's leaving sometime over the next month. If he wants to stay until they're right or stay until this place is humming like it should, it's going to be a while.
yeah, I think so. So I mean that's kind of I guess my expectation would be that the ultimate question of season five, which again we'll go ahead and speculate, might probably be the last season, but who knows, man. Um, they'll just keep dragging this thing out.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and look, that's fine. I do have some minor gripes about the pacing or whatever, maybe a little bit, but for the most part, I love these characters. I love spending time in this world, and there's like a bunch more stuff that we'll have to move to talk about that I think is just more along those lines
yeah,
than the main
yeah. That
plot.
that was maybe the best part of four is that, and maybe it was the schedule of the other more quote unquote famous actors and actresses in the show that we got a lot of these other ancillary characters and their stories, and focus on what they're doing, even at the expense of some of the Carmi, Richie, Sid stuff, even though there was plenty of them.
Yeah, right. So I want to move. Look, I want to move to talk about some of these other characters, but first, just to like kind of put a bow on what I was saying because I didn't actually finish the thought.
Yeah,
I think season five will likely focus on, or the big question in the background, or whatever, will be about Carmi in this sense of the space of the question we've been talking about.
yeah,
His personal life, his professional life. He'll still be working at the Bear. I'm going to go ahead and guess that they ultimately do make it work and like win a Michelin star and stuff like that, right?
yeah, yeah,
Probably. I don't,
yeah,
maybe not, but what I'm guessing is the likelihood of it that he sticks around and helps make it successful. And then kind of the question at the end is, oh, well, now am I still following through with the idea of leaving and that's the
yeah,
right life decision? Um, or maybe not, which
yeah.
is
I
be
mean,
kind of funny if he ultimately ends up sticking around and just like
yeah.
made this terrible business decision to write himself out of the partnership agreement.
I mean, if it is confirmed that this is the last season in with five, I mean, it just makes sort of narrative sense that the last episode is his last day at the restaurant, leaving it behind, leaving it in a good place, leaving it in a place that, he had wanted to be, maybe what he always hoped the restaurants would be that he worked at.
I mean, yeah, but I think part of the problem here, right, is the legitimacy of the question you put on our show sheet. Um, if he does leave the restaurant, what's he going to do then?
Yeah, I know,
Like
I know.
it's from what we've seen of this guy, it doesn't seem like he has other interests.
No,
You know what I mean? Like
he can go write cookbooks, I guess.
I don't know. But if the whole point is he doesn't love it anymore,
Yeah,
then yeah, I don't think going to write cookbooks
right.
quite makes sense. Like what go get a job as a mechanic or something. It just doesn't. I don't have any idea. Um, so we'll see where that goes, and I am really curious about it. But let's talk about some of this other stuff. Maybe jumping to the wedding episode is a good place to start because that brings a lot of the character threads together in a way.
Yep, I think so.
Um, First of all, really enjoyed the episode.
Yes, definitely.
Um, you have the scene with everyone getting under the table. I did think watching that scene, did the space under the table keep enlarging? Like I didn't think it was that big of a table at the beginning
It,
of
it
that scene.
kept getting longer and taller, I think. I think.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Like at first I thought it was like a little table, and so Richie was just like kneeling under the table. And then it became like, oh, there's space for 20 people to sit under this damn table.
Right, right.
Um, but that was a good scene. I mean, I don't know where to start, I guess, with this episode. I mean, I guess maybe we to make a segue from what we're talking about with Carmi, it's of significance to his character development that he agrees to go.
Yeah. He agrees to go. He perhaps inadvertently or reluctantly has this conversation with Bob Odenkirk's character, Uncle Lee. It's maybe just meant to. I think this episode just served not only to get all these people together and put everyone, in a place where they could film them all in one scene, but also just to show, okay, there's a lot of people here taking steps. Carmi took steps to be there. Richie took some steps in this episode. Even Donna took steps in this episode. Sid took steps in this, right? So we're sort of this all showed over this 68 or 69 minutes, however long this was, how each of them are making these moves that they need to. Um, and maybe it's centered around this idea of something joyful as opposed to chaos, because that's sort of where they want to go, and using that as a backdrop was the way to do it.
Right. I mean, there's this great little conversation towards the beginning between what's his name? Stevie, John Mulaney's character.
Oh,
Steve.
yes, Steve,
Stevie.
Steve, yeah.
And Claire. And they're talking to Frank, right? And then Frank walks away. It was like, oh yeah, no idea what he's getting into, right? Like you got this many Berzanos in one place, expecting the chaos and the kind of thing like we saw in Fishes,
Yeah,
and so on. But then, yeah, that doesn't happen. It doesn't quite go like that. I mean, you do have yelling between Natalie and Francine Fax, but then they ultimately reconcile. And as you say, it's mostly a joyful event, and even to the point where um, Richie's daughter, what's her name, Eva,
Eva, yeah.
she finally decides, okay, I will dance with Frank.
Right,
Like
right.
okay, we will give it a shot.
Yeah.
Um,
It's interesting, the mirror of fishes with everybody sitting together around this table and the chaos that happens there, and everybody sitting together under this table in bears. Maybe most interesting about who's not there. I mean, clearly Mikey is not there. Donna is not there. Lee is not there.
mhm.
Some of the most dramatic, chaotic, um, most difficult characters or people in these folks' life are not there. So it's sort of this group can move on and do better. This group can move on and grow, right? And we can start with this group right here. That's I hate thinking in a sense that it leaves Donna and Cicero and others behind, but it's sort of that group, those people are not going to define us. We can move on, sort of starting here. Just kind of interesting mirror between that and the table scene at Forks and the table scene here in Bears.
Yeah, I don't know if I quite thought about it that way. I mean, of course, Donna is at the wedding,
Hmm.
and of course, that's part of why Carmi wouldn't want to go.
Right.
Um, they talk briefly, and then did Richie who saves him from that conversation?
Yes, I think so.
Totally making up. Like, you're supposed to be helping in the kitchen. Come on,
Yeah,
bro.
you're supposed to be helping with the food.
Um, but we do see Donna having then a conversation with Sid, and she seems better, or like she seems like she's doing fairly well overall, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like she doesn't, I mean, she's still the character that she is, but
Yes.
we don't have any big blow up or anything like that. And
Right. Right.
then I do think the conversation between Carmi and Lee is interesting. We want to talk about that a bit more.
Yeah, it was interesting in that, especially um let's see what happens. Who's trying to test the other? Oh, Lee doesn't believe that Carmi was there at the funeral. Lee thinks I think that Carmi, much like Richie did, just deserted them and their time where they needed him the most, or time that it
No,
was.
that's not
And so
right.
he's sort of is he sort of testing him to make sure he was at the funeral?
No, he says he saw him there. Lee is the one person who saw him at
Who
the funeral.
saw who saw Carmi there? Was he saying something like, "What did I wear?" or what? Or am I thinking of a different conversation?
Um, Man, I don't remember that level of detail, but it does stand out in my memory that it's almost the beginning of their conversation where Lee says, "So the last time I saw you was at Mikey's funeral.
Was it Mikey's funeral? Okay, okay.
I saw you. I
Yeah,
saw you leave. No, I didn't tell anyone. I didn't think it was any of my business, right? But
yeah,
like
yeah,
that's kicking off the conversation because they start talking about why Carmi left, and then Lee's calling him out in terms of his reasons, right?
yeah, yeah. That makes more sense. I think a different conversation that um that Carmi had a different part of the season, but it is odd, I guess, that that's the thing that sort of leads to this. I guess even if it's just a minor connection between Carmi and Lee, that Carmi's sort of shocked that Mikey and Lee developed this relationship and they became close and they became friends. And just I think that's probably a pretty poignant moment for Carmi to think, well, something that happened when I wasn't there. There's a lot of people reminding him that he wasn't there throughout this season. And I think that was something he's like, oh, I missed this, and there was some growth there, and I wasn't a part of it.
Yeah, he doesn't believe it at first, right? Which of
Yeah,
course we saw their previous confrontation in Fishes, for example.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I mean, I think part of what I really enjoyed about that conversation, which I think you confused a little bit with the conversation with Richie at the end,
that's I think what I'm thinking of. Yeah,
which we'll talk about that more too. But I think part of what I like about the conversation between Carmi and Lee is it's one of these examples of a level of just kind of honest
mm,
communication
yeah,
because they don't like each other.
that's
They
right.
don't care about each
Right.
other, right? So it's like there's there's no kind of, oh, I'm going to worry about if I'm hurting your feelings or whatever at play in this conversation, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
but yet they are bound together in a certain way through the family dynamics or whatever. But yeah, it I enjoyed the scene a lot. I think in part for that reason. There's real like kind of truthfulness to everything they were saying.
definitely.
Um, Maybe let's go ahead and jump then to the conversation with Richie at the end because it's
Yeah,
interesting how it factors in this question of whether Carmi was at the funeral or the fact that he did show up to the funeral, but then didn't go in, like
yeah,
he felt like he didn't have a right to be there or something like that. Right. And then I think it's Richie in that conversation who asked him what he was wearing, right? And so on and so
yeah.
forth,
Okay, yeah.
or something
I
like
think
that.
you're right. Yeah, yeah. On one hand very, I think, satisfied that they had that conversation and clearly got this stuff out and was able to work through these things and these issues they had not only with each other but with Mikey in that relationship. It just seemed like there was always more levels, sort of deeper parts of that confrontation between Richie and Carmi than just the Mikey stuff, which I think they do uncover some of that stuff. They do uncover the idea of, resenting one another, thinking that Richie's trying to come in on the family, that Carmi left the family. Just a lot. There are layers to it, but all just kind of coalesces around this idea of, well, you weren't there for Mikey when we all needed you the most.
Right. Yeah. Which that to tie it back to what we were talking about before in terms of Carmi, I think we have to distinguish between how he's thinking about things and whether that is, I don't know, right or healthy
Yeah.
or like there's a certain level where no, like Carmi is not thinking about things in the right way or in a psychologically healthy way. I don't know
Yeah.
exactly how to put that, but I think it's important to bear in mind. Like he has his damage,
Yes.
like going back to season 2 when Richie calls him Donna, part of why that cuts to the
Mm.
extent that it does is like it's not entirely wrong,
Yeah. Yeah, to see
right?
that that was his clear path. That's where he was going. That's where he's headed. Not knowing anything about their father, seeing a lot now about who Mikey was. Yeah, Carmen was not going down a path necessarily of being the type of person Mikey was. He was definitely going down the path of becoming the next Donna. And that is something that, both, as you said, cuts, hurts, but also leads to a realization of I have to I have to course correct a little bit and also work this thing out with her.
Yeah, I mean, he's got some self-awareness of it. He's working on
Hmm.
it, but I do continue to think that somehow this idea he has in his head that he has to choose between the bear and his personal life, or
Yeah.
however we put that, something about that is off. So we'll see where that goes. Picking up with Donna, then we do get something of a reconciliation, I guess, between Carmi and Donna. I mean, he agrees to go over there and deliver the photo book, and he ends up making her lunch or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, so that was nice. I don't know how much more to say about that, but I definitely think it's significant.
Yeah. And just thematically interesting that, he makes her the chicken dish that we saw him making in season 3 with Thomas Keller at the French Laundry, back when we presumed that he loved cooking and wanted to absorb it and was trying to get everything he could and had this really positive mentor and role model like Thomas Keller showing him how to do things that this sort of dish sort of represent a sense of care and intimacy between those two, and that's what he chooses to serve to his mom. Just kind of an interesting thematic thing that they did there.
Yeah, yeah, good call. Um, and I think it was well done in terms of, I said that they reconcile, but it's not like, oh, just make up, everything's fine now,
Yeah,
or
right.
whatever, because it doesn't go that way, right?
It doesn't. It
But the
doesn't.
fact that they're even talking to one another, you know, it's like Donna recognizes that she can apologize, but it's never going to be sufficient, you
Right.
know, and I guess a big part of it is just the fact that she seems to have gone into that kind of space herself. And
Correct. Yeah.
so it's nice to see some level of reconciliation between them, which has been hanging out there,
Yeah.
because, well, I mean, in the present timeline of the show, the wedding was the first time that they saw each other.
Yeah. That's exactly right. And I think why a lot of people thought Ice Chips was so powerful last season, this idea of that connection that Donna and Sugar were able to create, even though Sugar was not interested in it by the time the episode starts. But it got to a place of where they really wanted to be, and yeah, hopefully Carmy can do the same thing.
Yeah. I want to talk about Uncle Cicero a bit.
Yeah.
Interesting character, right? I mean, I think I said last week when he was introduced to the show back in season one, I didn't necessarily trust him.
Yeah.
He seems like, well, he's the business guy. I thought maybe he was like connected to the mafia or something,
Right. Right.
And like maybe he is. So I don't know if that's ever been like ruled
We don't know where his
out,
money comes from. We don't know that at all.
but I thought he was going to be the kind of hard ass business is business. You might love this kid, but if it's not making a profit, you're not going to be able to do it. That's just the reality of the world kind of guy. And at one
Yeah.
level, he is. But at
Yeah.
another level, I think we really find out, particularly in season four,
Yeah.
that he actually has been kind of bending over backwards to try to give them the opportunity to make this work. I mean, is he selling his house?
I, is that the house that Donna was selling? That was the impression I got.
Me too. And then what? And the scene where he's trying to talk to his kid through the door,
Yeah,
through the
yeah,
closed
uh,
door.
yeah. I don't know if we have a confirmation about that, but it certainly seems that that was the case, and that yeah, the sister is sort of throwing her that as an opportunity. Part of me wonders if this is why the computer was brought on at the end of season 3. The idea of we have to show more that Cicero is really torn between this idea of bottom line versus how much I care about these people and how much he even says it this season, how much I wish I had done for them when they needed someone the most. Computers got to be on one side, sort of pulling him towards the numbers and the bottom line and the profit. But the other side is just, he can't escape that because I mean, literal and it's literal family and how much he just feels obligated to them.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think it was a good move too, narratively,
Mhm.
because by now, at least, I definitely believe that he really does want the thing to work and
Yeah.
for them to be happy and help them out and all of that, which where I don't know, earlier on in the show, in the series, I was not so sure about that,
Yeah.
he was the guy who had money who would maybe loan them money, but businessman guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely got the impression. It's interesting that they didn't make it more explicit. Um, but I definitely got the impression that his kid is mad at him because they're selling their house because they can't afford that house anymore. That was the
Yeah,
impression
that
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 I
was
got.
it was a very strange, obviously one-sided conversation where he's just like bearing his soul to his son about some things and but not exactly sure what was implied there. I'd love to find out more about that. Not sure if we'll get a direct answer for it.
I imagine something will circle back around with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a weird thing to leave hanging. And that was definitely the implication that I took.
Hmm.
But like I feel like it would be easy to watch this season and if you weren't paying as much attention as you and I were, just like
Yeah.
not even notice this bit being in there.
Right. 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 Yep.
So I thought that was kind of odd. I mean, it does make sense that, of course, Uncle Jimmy's not the kind of guy who's going to tell you about those types of problems. Like he's going to keep that um, hidden in a way, or like he's not going to make a big deal out of it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Um, but that was how I read that. So we'll see how this factors in.
Yeah.
Um, it would be interesting once this whole series is done, maybe to like go back to season one and just watch it all.
Go all the way through. Are our characters the same? Are they, particularly someone like Cicero, is he consistent throughout? I think he will be. And why again they introduce different parts, but yeah, it'd be great to watch that whole thing over again. I've not done that since this has been out. Only bits and pieces of seasons before, but not never a whole thing through.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm also thinking about it in terms of how, in narrative terms, there's not a lot of time in between seasons or whatever. So it'd be interesting to see how it flows. Um, I made the remark to you last week. I think that I found myself thinking structurally, it might have worked better in my mind if Sid's decision had been like the arc of season three,
Right.
and at the end of season three, she decides, "Oh, I am going to stay." So, but that's not what this show is. That's not how it's doing it, right? It
Yeah.
has
Yeah.
all of this stuff at this point that is kind of carrying over from one season to the next. Um, Not just in terms of the overall plot, but
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know, smaller stuff, right? I mean, if we go back to Claire, where do things stand with Claire coming out of season four? Well, I don't know. At the wedding, they seem to be getting along pretty well.
They surely did.
You've got then Carmi calling her when he's about to go visit his
Hmm.
mom, which makes sense. They've known each other for a long time and so on and so forth, right? So, it definitely feels like we're getting back into the space of friendship.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, do we get back into the space of, you know, romantic love or
Yeah.
whatever? I don't know, man. We'll find out next season, I guess.
Again, yeah. Clearly something they were leaving for the next season. Yeah.
Um, good. Okay, let's see. More thoughts on Tina?
Yeah, just what for one of my favorite characters, was a little disappointed at what her arc was this season, which was to say not much.
Yeah, her arc was
Yeah,
basically, can I cook pasta in three
yeah.
minutes?
Can I get pasta in 3 minutes? We get one brief conversation where she's actually trying something to make something for her husband and doing this on her own and being creative with ideas and he seems to love it, but I don't know, just the arc of okay, I finally was able to cook the pasta in the time needed. It took some encouragement from from Jesse and from Luca and others to do it, but I finally got there because of portion control and because of people giving me encouraging words. And I don't know, I just after season three, I thought we were on a real upward trajectory with her, and just didn't give her much this season.
Yeah, they really didn't. I mean, even the pasta stuff
Yeah,
was kind of like overly dragged out.
yeah,
I mean, like, really, it took you that long to think about portioning it out?
yeah, exactly. I think Sid and Carmi would have said something a long time ago.
Right, or the ever people would have like said, "Hey,
Right.
you got 3 minutes, and here's the process," you know.
Yep. Yep.
Um, so I don't know, but yeah, I do appreciate Tina, and she had a couple of really good moments, right? I mean, there's also when she asked Carmi whether he's seen the baby yet, right?
Mm,
That moment where her character serves well as the one to be doing that, right? To be making
yeah.
him realize that he hasn't seen his niece yet, and like that's a problem. And the scene you mentioned at home, right, with her husband. Um, I appreciated that. I enjoyed it, but there's not a lot to it, But
Yeah.
it's just
No.
a nice little kind of vignette when
Yeah.
she's asking him if he'll actually be honest, and
Yeah.
this sucks. It was nice little. It was a great scene, but
Yeah. No, there's not much there, but still we get still have more time, thankfully, with Tina.
I mean, I guess if nothing, another way we can think about this is Tina has cemented herself so much as just integral to
Yes.
the Bear staff in the kitchen, right?
That's right.
So, is there more that needs to happen in terms of that development? You know, they tried something with the pasta thing, and it was like I don't know. She was like kind
Yeah.
of already in the position, I guess. So,
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, maybe they give her some sort of, you know, promotion opportunity in season five, but hopefully it's a little bit more.
yeah, Marcus he wins the Food and Wine Award. You mentioned that in the summary. I don't know. I'm just trying to make sure that we kind of
Yeah, touch
talk about everything we should talk about here.
on everybody. I was confused why they brought up the stuff with his father this season. I mean, obviously, from the end of season one through beginning of season three, we had this stuff with his mom being sick, his mom passing away. He's selling her house in this season, but then he goes and was going to meet with his dad one morning, but decided not to do it. It just I was unsure, and maybe you have thoughts on this, is why that was included for Marcus's story this season.
Yeah, no, good. I'm glad that you mentioned that. That's another one. You know what I mean? Like put it in the bucket with the is Uncle Jimmy selling his house because he can't afford it anymore?
Yeah,
Like this is another kind of dangling thread of what exactly is the source of estrangement, I guess, between
hmm
Marcus and his father. Um, and what does their relationship look like? And it's clear that Marcus doesn't want to see him, but his dad keeps reaching out,
yeah,
perhaps in part because Marcus's mom died recently, and it goes to the level of his dad saying, "Hey, I'm going to be at this restaurant at this time."
yeah.
And Marcus thinks about going to the point of going and seeing his dad through the window and then walking away. And that's where we leave it.
That's where we
That's
leave
where
it.
we leave it for the
Now, does
season.
he at the end? Does he not does he text his dad the article of him being named one of the new chefs? Is that who he sent that message to at the end?
Oh, maybe. I
I
have to
think
look
that's I think that's who he sent it to, which was another confusing thing for me. It's like, okay, you want nothing to do with him except to show him that you've accomplished these things. I mean, I would love to have known. Is that part of the relationship that he just was always driving you to try to be more, do more, accomplish more, and that's why you don't want to have this sort of sense of connection with him, and so now you're trying to show him what you've accomplished, or is it more of I want you to be proud of me. I want to share this life with you. Maybe here's a way I can and do it. I'd love to have just known a little bit more about that if you're going to introduce the this line of who the father is.
No, yeah, I think it's more along the lines of his dad like walked out on them or something like that.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think we got some indications of that earlier, and I'd have to refresh my memory on it, but um, that's what I would expect. The backstory is probably more along the lines of Marcus not forgiving his father for what his father's done.
yeah,
Um, and I expect we'll get more in season five. You know what I mean? Like, maybe these are also reasons why when season four ended, I never felt like that was going to be the end of the show because it was like there's too much out there that's not sufficiently
Yeah.
resolved, and yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah. That's I hope a question that somebody asks Store at some point over the next few months. When did you know you were getting a season five? And was it after you had locked the season, or did you have a sense that he was coming back when you were developing season four? I'd love to know the answer to that question.
Yeah, same. All right. Anything else we need to hit on here? I mean, I think we've
Yeah.
covered it, but there's so much that we're trying to
Yeah.
cover in one podcast. Anything
Pretty
else you want to talk
comprehensive.
about?
Yeah.
All right.
I think that about covers what I had here. Glad to be able to talk through another season of The Bear, and I presume we'll get to do it again, either in a year or sometime after a year.
Yeah, I'm looking. I enjoy the show, right?
Yeah.
I do think that some of the criticisms are landing more for me now than I let them land after season three,
Hmm.
which is weird because it seems like a lot of people. I've seen a lot of people saying like season four is better than season three, and I'm like, I don't. Okay, maybe, or maybe they're in the same space or
Yeah.
something like that. But I enjoy the show and I love the characters, and there's so much great stuff in here.
Hmm.
And I guess I try not to focus on it too much, but I
Yeah.
do get some of the complaints about things seeming a little bit, I don't know, dragged out, or
Yeah.
some of these scenes maybe even feel a bit melodramatic, you know. Um, but I definitely enjoyed it as a whole, and yeah,
Yeah.
so look forward to season five.
Exactly. Looking forward to these characters. I think no matter what you think about the pace, the plot, the narrative, the theme of this show, just it's hard to find characters like this on TV now. It's just good to spend time with them.
Absolutely. All right. So thanks always for listening. Hopefully you've enjoyed the podcast. If so, please do leave a good rating, review, all that good stuff. If you're on YouTube, hit the thumbs up, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Greatly appreciate it. You can follow TV Obsessive on social media. If you search for TV Obsessive, you should find us on whatever platform. Check out tvobsessive.com. You can find written work on The Bear there from Ryan on the most recent season and past seasons. I did write something about Claire a couple years ago, if you want to read that
Yeah.
too. And a whole bunch of stuff about other TV shows you can find on tvobsessive.com. Check out the site, poke around. And we'll be back with you on Friday of this week, just on Murderbot, episode 9. So again, if you've been listening regularly week to week, that's what's going on. Happy July 4th. And on Friday, July 4th, we'll just release our conversation on Murderbot episode 9. So, that will be next up, and we'll see you then.
All right. See you next time.